Hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Uranium Market Minute. Today is Wednesday, January 19th, and this is episode number 65. My name is Justin Hune. I am your host. I'm the founder and publisher of the Uranium Insider Pro newsletter, the only investing newsletter that focuses solely on uranium and publishes on a regular monthly basis. Thank you again for tuning in. Really appreciate you all. If you've been enjoying this content, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell. You will be notified whenever we publish a new episode, which is just about every day. And very much appreciate all of the support. We're now at episode 65, making some good progress here and keeping you up to date as much as possible with this very complex and volatile sector, the uranium sector. So before we get into it, as always, nothing in this video is intended to be investing advice. I'm not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please always do your own due diligence when it comes to investing. Always take responsibility for your own choices. Let's jump right into the daily scoreboard. Spot price of uranium down slightly today, 45.37 a pound mid-market. We're seeing actually substantial volume for the month of January relative to previous Januaries. Much of that has been the spot physical uranium trust, but there is a lot of trader action happening as well. And though we're seeing the price stay relatively stable, trickling down a little bit today, but really not much of a concern. Yesterday's spot raised 1.55 million. They did not purchase any pounds of uranium. So they have currently 30.2 million in cash. Likely they're not going to spend much of that. So they will need to issue new shares into the market via their ATM to raise cash to buy more pounds. The chart is still pretty set up pretty well here. We're sitting right about trading even with their net asset value. So we'll need some new funds to flow in order for this thing to really get off the ground again. But so far this year, still they've purchased 2.6 million pounds in that was just about 2 weeks time from the year to date. So pretty substantial buying on the behalf of SPUT year to date so far. They've raised almost 120 million in new capital this year as well. As I've mentioned many times, they have allocated 3.5 billion total fundraising possible through their ATM, and they've raised over 1.1 billion of that 3.5 since August of last year. And they've used that to purchase 25.6 million pounds of uranium. Just an absolutely huge new buyer in the market. Turning to the equity ETFs, neither URA or URNM reported any change in outstanding shares whatsoever. Their combined AUMs did slip on yesterday's weak market action. They now sit just above 1.9 billion of combined assets under management between the two ETFs. Let's go ahead and take a look at the charts before we get into what the heck is going on in the sector. Starting off with URA, URA is up 2.41% so far on the day with a little more than an hour left of trading. Nice little recovery today, not huge volume. Doesn't really look like a strong recovery, but it's the beginning. At least we're not seeing more selling today, which is good to see. URA still in the process of their rebalance, which I will discuss a little bit more in the mailbag section. Spot physical uranium trust is down slightly. It's up on the day, 0.21%. Up on the day. However, it looks like a mixed bag in terms of trading with the spot price down. We are probably at a slight premium to NAV here, but probably not enough to really get things moving. The chart really is coiling. It continues to coil. And as I've said multiple times, typically what happens is when you have consolidation patterns, they do break out in the direction of the overall trend. If the direction of the overall trend is clearly up, judging by this rising 200-day moving average, this purple line here. So only a matter of time before we see that next move. And it's great to see that the spot price is relatively stable considering the purchasing that's happened and the trading that's happening. Doesn't look like there's any nefarious action going on suppressing the price, and it's holding up, which is a strong sign. Let's take a look at Cameco just to see how it's trading on the day. Cameco is up a little over 2% on the day and looking like potentially a bottoming candle. I'd like it to see it close closer to the highs on the day. We'll see. We've got another hour of trading if some buyers show up into the sector. So the mailbag question, I've had multiple questions, mainly expressions of frustration about positive fundamentals and the stocks not moving in the direction of the fundamentals. And so I just wanted to speak on that briefly and tell you kind of what we're seeing in the market currently. So we have sort of a perfect storm happening in terms of adding to the selling that we've seen in the past couple of weeks. And actually, since the highs of November, we have seen a couple of short recoveries, but the pressure has still been on the selling side of things. So what we've seen currently is a shaky broad market, or at least kind of jitters amongst retail that the broad market could crash or sharply move lower. And that, of course, affects all investments, right? Even if you see substantial selling in any popular sector, that could affect every other sector to some extent. And we've seen on days like yesterday with the broad market down pretty substantially that did affect the uranium equities. Second, we're still in the midst of the URA rebalance. And something that's happening with that is that they're likely to be including the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which means they have to sell down the rest of their holdings to make room for that inclusion, as well as add the cash for that inclusion. A small development related to that, which looks pretty positive, is that Solactive, which is the manager of URA, has decided to remove BHP from all of their vehicles, including URA. So the removal of BHP, they had just over a $20 million position in BHP. That will help offset the selling that needs to happen to include SPUT. So that selling is going to be ongoing for the next week and a half, possibly up to 2 weeks. Usually it trickles slightly into February. And I should make a correction. I mentioned yesterday that URNM rebalances quarterly. They actually changed that a few months ago and decided to do that semi-annually. So now they rebalance in late March and late September each year. URA rebalances late January and late July. So twice a year for both ETFs. And those rebalances always kind of shake up the sector a little bit. If you own a small cap that gets included in a rebalance, obviously that's good for that stock. If you are sitting on a holding and they have to add a new inclusion in that part of that rebalance is selling down of your holding, obviously that's kind of a bummer. That's just the way it is. It works both ways, right? And obviously when the sector is moving overall bullish, the ETFs definitely help. These are highly liquid vehicles that allow large institutional players to take positions in the sector, and therefore they end up buying the underlying holdings by proxy, essentially. So yeah, and thirdly, I would say that sentiment is very, very powerful. And you can see based on the comments to my videos, you can see based on the Twitter comments, just in general, that when the sentiment gets very low, usually that's a turning point. When the sentiment is euphoric, usually that's a point when the sector is ready to correct. So currently the sentiment is very, very low. People get frustrated when you hear nonstop positive fundamentals, but the sector doesn't move in your direction. And I would just say, again, zoom out, keep your eye on the long term. And in the meantime, if you're already positioned, there's really nothing to do in the short term. If you're not already positioned and you're adding, you can take advantage of moments like this, weeks like this, where you see sector weakness that's coming from either something like the URA rebalance, or it's coming from broad market, or it's coming from just a general correction in the uranium market. These corrections are going to happen. They've happened multiple times in the previous bull market, as I mentioned before. So they will continue to happen. Hang in there. Good to know that the rebalance is something that is contributing to the sector's weakness right now. But it's nice to see that there are some buyers offsetting that selling, like we're seeing today, seeing most stocks in the space at least green intraday. So hopefully this is helpful, and hang in there, everybody. Cheers. I will see you guys tomorrow. Be well.